Look at a dog. Really look at one. Watch the way its eyebrows move when you make eye contact. That small, subtle lift, almost like a child asking a silent question. Innocent, soft, completely disarming. Now consider this. Wolves don't do that, not even slightly. That expression, the one that melts something in your chest, didn't exist 50,000 years ago. It was built, piece by piece, generation by generation, through one of the most precise evolutionary processes ever observed in a domestic animal. And it was built for one purpose, to manipulate you. If that makes you uncomfortable, stay with me, because what the science actually found is stranger than the manipulation. And I want you to see it clearly. Drop a comment below with what you think is really going on with your dog. We'll come back to that by the end. I want to be clear about something before we go further. I'm not using the word manipulate to be provocative. I'm using it because it's the most scientifically accurate word available. Dogs didn't develop this ability by accident. They developed it because the ones who could trigger human nurturing instincts survived longer, ate better, and had more offspring. What we're looking at is evolution, operating with almost surgical precision, shaping an animal's face to exploit the deepest parts of the human brain. That should fascinate you, because it fascinated me deeply when I first understood what was actually happening. For most of human history, we assumed that dogs loved us because they were domesticated, that somewhere in the process of wolves becoming pets, something like loyalty was baked into the relationship. We told ourselves a story. Humans adopted wolf pups, raised them with kindness, and over generations, those wolves became dogs, bonded to us by shared history and mutual affection. It's a beautiful story, and it's incomplete in a way that changes everything, because the bond between dogs and humans isn't primarily the result of care given. It's the result of selection pressure. The wolves that survived alongside humans weren't the biggest or the fastest. They were the ones that were best at reading human faces, triggering human emotions, and generating a response that translated into food and shelter. Think about that. Natural selection over tens of thousands of years, running a quiet experiment. Which wolf behaviors produce the most reliable human response? Which faces get fed? The answer is right there on your dog's face. But in 2019, a research team did something deceptively simple. They looked at a dog's face and compared it anatomically to a wolf's. What they found there, I genuinely did not expect it. A team of researchers at Duquesne University and University College London began comparing the facial anatomy of wolves and dogs in precise detail, specifically the muscles around the eyes, and they found something that wolves simply do not have. A small muscle called the levator anguli oculi medialis. This muscle, sometimes referred to as the puppy dog eyes muscle, does one thing. It raises the inner brow. It creates that familiar, almost heartbreaking expression, the one that makes a dog look like it's sad, or asking for something, or quietly desperate for your attention. Wolves don't have this muscle, or at the very least, they have only a rudimentary, underdeveloped version of it that produces almost no visible effect. Dogs have it prominently, consistently, across breeds. This wasn't a side effect of domestication. This was the point. But the researchers didn't stop at anatomy, and they tested the expression it produces. They filmed shelter dogs interacting with humans, tracking specifically when dogs raised their inner brows. And then they tracked adoption rates. Dogs that used this expression more frequently were adopted faster, not because they were better trained, not because they were younger or more attractive by conventional measures, but because they were better at producing a specific facial movement that humans respond to almost involuntarily. If you've ever walked into a shelter and felt an immediate, inexplicable pull toward one particular dog, there is now a very specific biological explanation for why that happened. Now here's where it gets strange, because this expression doesn't work by accident. It works because it's targeting something ancient, something in you that was there long before dogs existed. The human response to this expression isn't learned. It isn't cultural. It's hardwired, and it's not even originally about dogs. Researchers studying infant-directed behavior, the way adults respond to babies, have identified a pattern called Cognition schema, first described by ethologist Konrad Lorenz in the 1940s. And the idea is that certain physical features, large eyes, small noses, rounded cheeks, high foreheads, trigger caregiving instincts in adults automatically. These features function as biological signals. Protect this, nurture this, feed this. Human infants have these features. And now, apparently, so do dogs. I personally think this is one of the most striking examples of evolutionary convergence I've ever encountered. Dogs didn't evolve to look like wolves. So over thousands of years of living alongside humans, they evolved, at least partially, to look like our young, to occupy the same emotional register in our brain as something helpless that needs care, and it worked spectacularly. The deeper you go into this research, the more you start to see how comprehensive the adaptation is. It's not just the eyes. Dogs have also developed a sensitivity to human gaze that is essentially unique in the animal kingdom. When a dog looks at you and you look back, that's when both of your bodies release oxytocin, the same bonding hormone released between mothers and infants during breastfeeding. This was documented in a 2015 study published in the journal Science, led by researcher Miho Nagasawa at Azabu University in Japan. Wolves, even wolves raised by humans from birth, don't show this pattern. The gaze feedback loop is specific to dogs. It evolved in them, which means it was selected for, because dogs that could produce this oxytocin response in humans were cared for more attentively. If you've ever wondered why making eye contact with your dog feels so different from making eye contact with almost any other animal, now you know. You're not imagining the connection, but you might be slightly misattributing its origin. Does this mean dogs don't feel affection? Does it mean the relationship is fake? That's the question I kept coming back to, and the answer reshaped how I think about the whole story. No, the bond is real, measurably, physiologically real. Dogs' stress hormones drop when their owner returns. Their nervous systems co-regulate with ours. The affection is not theater. But the mechanism that got us here is not the one we usually imagine. We tend to think we domesticated dogs by choosing which ones to keep. The more honest picture is that dogs domesticated us, or at least participated actively in their own domestication, by becoming extraordinarily good at being chosen. There's a version of this story where the dog is a passive recipient of human kindness. And then there's the version the science actually supports, where the dog is an active participant in an evolutionary negotiation that has been running for 50,000 years and is still running every time your dog looks at you with that expression and you reach almost involuntarily for a treat. The levator, anguli, oculi, medialis, a muscle that doesn't exist in wolves, a muscle that, in its current form, exists only in a species that has spent millennia under direct selection pressure from human emotional responses. Think about what that means. Natural selection is usually impersonal, organisms adapting to climate, predators, food availability. But here is a case where the selection pressure was human psychology. The environment that shaped the dog's face wasn't geography or temperature or prey distribution. It was us, our empathy, our nurturing instinct, showing our inability to look away from a pair of soft, upward-tilted eyes. We didn't just create dogs. Dogs, in a very real sense, created a version of ourselves, the version that builds fires and shares food and keeps small creatures alive, not because it's strategically useful, but because something in our chest tells us to. I find that genuinely moving, not in spite of the manipulation, but somehow because of it. Because what it reveals is that the deepest part of this bond, the part that feels irrational and unconditional, has deep biological roots on both sides. The dog evolved to reach you, and some part of you evolved to be reached. The next time your dog looks up at you, that slow, patient gaze with the slightly raised inner brow, you might see something different now, not a trick, not a deception in any cynical sense. But the product of one of the most extraordinary evolutionary negotiations in the history of life on this planet, an animal that learned, over 50,000 years, to speak directly to the part of you that can't say no. Now, go back to that comment you were going to leave. What do you think is actually happening when your dog looks at you? I'm genuinely curious, and the answers are always more interesting than I expect. If the hidden side of animal behavior pulls at you the way it pulls at me, subscribe. Our next investigation goes somewhere equally unexpected. Nature is far more brilliant than we imagine. See you on our next exploration.